Good evening, everybody. My name is Pete Domenici Jr. I live in Albuquerque. I am an attorney. I have my own law practice. I have 5 lawyers that work with me, and we essentially represent cities, individuals, businesses who need to do business in this state and have to fight the state of New Mexico in order to stay in business or to grow their business. So I know how things are in Santa Fe. I know how things have changed in Santa Fe. I know intimately the difficulties that our bureaucracy places in our way, and I know intimately the corruption that is endemic in the way things are being done by this administration. What one of the candidates, I think Janice said, that your group, the High Plains Patriots, does their homework, so I tried to do a little homework, and that's what I do when I go out and travel. So I tried to do a little research on your group and identify some of the issues that are important to you. So I don't want to spend a lot of time speaking about myself. I have a website. I will be here afterwards. I'm happy to talk to you about what I'm doing. But I'd like to talk about some issues I think are important to you and tie them to this governor's race, because I think there's a connection between your issues and this governor's race. My understanding and my research has indicated to me, and I didn't know this, I apologize for not knowing it, but the very first provision of the New Mexico Constitution, after it defines the state and gives the boundaries, states, and I'll read this: all political power is vested in and derived from the people. All government of right originates with the people, is founded upon their goodwill, and is instituted solely for their good. That is the first provision of our state constitution. That is also the underlying principle of the United States Constitution, that people have to have a government in order to exist. But people's rights pre-exist that government. The government does not create the rights. People determine what the government will consist of. They put it in writing. They limit the government, and that is what the government is then authorized by the people who control it to do. So that's a fundamental principle of constitutional government in this country, and as I understand it, the fundamental principle of your group and probably others like you. It fits extremely well with conservative Republican principles of limited government, of individual rights, of rights for businesses to take activity without excessive regulation, and protection of private property. Those principles go hand in hand with the principle that government is limited by its constitution, whether it's the state of New Mexico Constitution or the U.S. Constitution. And I have 5 minutes now and 3 later, so I don't know if I'll finish my talk, but I think we are in the midst of what I will call a perfect storm for overturning progressive Democrats in New Mexico. And we are all part of that perfect storm. And by we, I mean the High Plains Patriots, I mean the citizens of Clovis. I know there's some teachers from Texas, wherever you are, all of us are we, and we're all part of this perfect storm. And the other parts of this perfect storm, I hope I have enough time to tell you now, are we have a governor who ran for president on the backs of New Mexicans, and we are all going to share that burden for many, many years. We have a governor who runs this, and governor and lieutenant governor who run this state top down, and then those people anointed the lieutenant governor to be their candidate. If you combine those weaknesses, those deficiencies, with what we have together as this groundswell of constitutionality, we are in a position to overturn progressive Democrats in Santa Fe. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, if our two patriots will please man the microphones, and if you have questions, please come on down to the microphones, and we'll ask those of the candidates. Remember, we want to keep these issues related.
Greg Weigel, United States Air Force Chief Master Sergeant, retired. From the candidates, I want to know, what are you going to do to release monies currently in the black hole of the Las Vegas Santa Fe corridor and out to eastern New Mexico?
Hold on. Did you guys in the back hear that question? Because I barely could. Okay. Is this microphone on?
It's on. On? You just need to stand closer to it. Okay. What are you going to do to release monies currently in the black hole of the Las Cruces Santa Fe corridor out to get released out to eastern New Mexico? And secondly, will somebody promise me you'll sell the rail runner to a private enterprise and quit subsidizing the fine money?
Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer the question, even though there was 2 of them. That's going to be 2 minutes total. And we'll start with Ms. Martinez.
I have traveled the entire state, and I certainly understand the needs of southeast New Mexico. And unfortunately, I understand what it's like to be south of Socorro and be the stepchild of New Mexico. We get forgotten in Doña County as well. Much of the funding stays north of Socorro in the larger area of Albuquerque and Santa Fe. One of the things that we have to do to release the funding is to make sure the oil and gas industry comes back and the dairy stay here in our area, and make sure that the regulations that stay in our state are common sense regulations and that they're evidence-based, so that those revenues come back to our state and that they are spread throughout our state. We have to remember who brings the revenues to New Mexico, not just that they're the spending machine out of Santa Fe. We have to remember that 20% of the general budget comes from the oil and gas industry. Last year it was 15%. Next year it's expected to drop as low as 13%. And that's because of the pit rule. The very first thing I will do is make sure to remove the pit rule so those revenues are generated, and remember who creates it. We have to remember who creates that revenue. Those funds have to come back to those communities. As far as the rail runner, absolutely, we need to make sure it is self-sufficient, and if a private company wants to take that, the rail runner over, absolutely, I'm in favor of doing that. We take $50 million a year to run that rail runner, and it's your tax dollars, and we're losing money every day. Thank you.
Okay, question. Money into the Rio Grande corridor, Albuquerque, Santa Fe, your fair share on the east side of the state. Seems to me that everybody gets fair share. You know, even my enemies have always called me a fair guy. So if I'm your governor, the east side of the state's going to get its fair share of resources. Absolutely, no questions asked. The fact of the matter is, though, we're going to be in declining revenue for the next few years, and until we get the oil and gas industry back at its feet, the dairymen coming back from Texas instead of leaving to Texas. So what do we do in the meanwhile? We balance the budget with common sense, and we turn around and only spend money on those things that are need to have, and what's left over we go to nice to have. And in that regard, we make sure that there's not a disproportionate amount of money dumped into silly things, Rio Grande corridor, wherever. Just the waste of money and the misuse of money is going to stop if I'm your governor. Now, you talk about the rail runner. There are several things that have been done under this administration. Rail runner's one, spaceport's another. The film industry getting incentives, they all raise questions.